We are now live.
Thank you. Everybody, I'll just wait another 30 seconds or so till the clock hits 9 o'clock. Okay. Excuse me. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Committee AM. It looks like we definitely have quorum. We have almost every member here, so thank you for joining us this morning. Look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. I haven't received any, and I don't see any. So with that, we'll move on. Item 3 already on our agenda, and that is our COVID-19 update from Dr. Ranaday. Dr. Ranaday, if you would, sir.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Excellent. Okay, good morning, everyone. I have a very brief update for you today. So our cases this morning, we're doing a refresh on the website. You'll see when they're uploaded in the next hour or so that it'll be at 392 cases, I think. So, right, our outbreak is sort of going like this locally, right? There are little blips, things like that. But I think the bigger picture is to say that what started as more and more cases in the GTA is moving outwards to London and Windsor, as you would expect. And so you're seeing these sort of other metropolitan areas move into other parts of the threshold. So from green to yellow, et cetera, right? And I think that the message is, we should expect to see that locally as well. We should expect to see cases rise. To what extent, I don't know, but it does really depend on everybody sort of reducing their average number of daily contacts with other people, their socializing contacts, right? Apart from essential things, work and school. So those are the messages. They're very much the same. They haven't really changed. What has changed around us is the situation. So really what I wanted to focus on is to remind you or put on your radar the number of cases that's happening in Ontario, but also in all of the other provinces of Canada. Essentially, we're seeing larger case numbers than we saw in the first wave, which is prompting sort of a you'll see this tension between people who are saying we need to lock everything down immediately versus no, we need to sort of see where this goes and make decisions based on health system capacity and other things. I think that last week there was a response framework that was released by the province, which puts public health units into certain categories based on a combination really of indicators as well as kind of overall understanding of what's happening in the area. And then very shortly after that, I think in response to some comments around what the threshold was, the province lowered the threshold to make it so that jurisdictions will move from category to category under a lower threshold, which I think is appropriate given the circumstances and given how fast we know things pick up once case numbers start to rise. So we've talked about cases, we've talked about the response framework, and then the other thing I wanted to just highlight for you, which no doubt you are aware of, is the encouraging news from 2 of the vaccine companies that have been putting their vaccines through clinical trials. Early reports, and I think actually one of them released sort of semi-final reports today on vaccines that are over 90% or have over 90% efficacy, which is really startling. It's encouraging. It is going to be a while, right, between now and when something gets approved and manufactured, distributed, et cetera. So we're still probably looking at, the middle of next year, if I had to guess, by the time people would actually be getting vaccines, given to them. Of course, there'll be some kind of prioritization around that, and that'll be dictated both by the studies as well as by what the licensing conditions are, which we can talk about more as needed. But it's encouraging. I think it's also suggestive that the other vaccines may also demonstrate similar effectiveness, and that way there would be a large pool of multiple different kinds of vaccines that we could start using by the middle of next year to immunize the population. So that's good news. But it doesn't take away from what's happening right now, which is that case numbers are rising, importance of adhering to public health measures, as well as having these ongoing discussions about what's appropriate to keep open and when and why. I think I will leave it there.
Okay, thank you. Look for questions from the committee. Councillor Napper, Deputy Warden Marriott after.
Thank you very much, Brian. Dr. Renade, who makes the decision on the nursing homes? Like here in, say, Meadowview, for instance, use that an example. Will you make that decision here? Like every Friday, if you have someone in there on the visitation I'm speaking of, right now we have the privilege of having an outing now and then. But will you make the call on that, or will that be Ford that makes the call? Will it be right across the province, although our numbers are low here and everything, and we're doing everything we're supposed to do? Who will make the initial call on that?
So thanks, Councillor. If the question is about visitation in long-term care homes, it's not really me, and it's not. I mean, I'm not sure to what extent the Premier is involved in that, but it would be really the Ministry of Long-Term Care, and they have set out thresholds and visitor restrictions based on their own risk categories. I think there's going to be work to try to harmonize the risk categories so that they all start to look the same. But for now, the Ministry of Long-Term Care has their own risk categories that they use to determine what the visitation situation is in any given jurisdiction. So what would be most likely is that it would not be home by home, but it would be homes within an area would have similar visitor restrictions. And then the only additional thing that I'm aware of around that is that where you have a corporation running homes in multiple jurisdictions, they may choose on an operational level to have the same rule apply everywhere, and it would be the strictest rule. But the Ministry of Long-Term Care's requirements would be based on what's going on in each jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Warden Marriott, who seems to have dropped off the call. Okay, well, hopefully he rejoins. Any other questions from the members who are currently present? Dr. Renade, I've got one, and maybe this will buy some time for the Deputy Warden to rejoin us. When you say our numbers here in Lambton County are reasonably flat, and as you said, we're starting to see the creep from the central areas like Toronto move towards the outlying areas like Windsor and London. Is it basically then what you're saying, it's inevitable that our numbers will rise? And with that, is there any suggestion that we should be doing less, or are we basically at status quo? Let's hold the fort. Numbers may rise anyway, but we're doing everything we can do, or should we be doing more to prevent that?
Yeah, it's hard to. Thanks, Councillor. It's hard to say whether we're doing everything we can do, because ultimately it does depend on, like, the population level impact of what happens depends on the actions of a number of individuals, right? And so I think that one, apart from essential activities, we do want everyone to really reduce their non-essential socializing. We haven't really made strict parameters around what constitutes essential, because one thing might be essential to one person, a different thing might be essential to a different person, right? I think that it's good to have the response framework because it helps to set out what would close or what settings would be unavailable to people in different situations, and it helps to give those sectors a chance to sort of plan, to say, okay, well, if this is coming, what's the next step? When would be the place where we would have to make changes or or do things differently in terms of restrictions or capacity requirements or things like that, right? I guess the open and ongoing question is, are those things enough? And are those things happening early enough, right? Like, so some of the things that happen later in the framework, like by the time you hit red, should they be happening at the yellow? And I think part of that is an ongoing discussion at the province, and part of that is how things play out on the ground, right? We've only really had this response framework publicly available and implemented through regulation for, I don't know, like a week and a half. I don't even think it's been 2 weeks. So we really do have to sort of look at what's happening in those other places and then adjust the response framework to, as needed based on the settings, recognizing also that there's tremendous impact on all of these settings when you start to shut them down, right? And so the economic and personal and other health consequences and social consequences of that are also significant. So I think that's what's going on right now is like looking at the response framework and saying, is it at the right thresholds, and are the actions under those thresholds appropriate? But we're going to have to see that over time and build it as it goes.
Follow up to that then, when you're discussing settings in particular, is there a trend as to what settings right now are proving to be the biggest spreaders? I look toward, for that example in Hamilton where I think 75 people from a gym. I haven't been to a gym since March, but, every day I'm thinking, well, maybe I wonder if this is the right time or not. I'm trying to do my part and withhold from that activity. But is that an example of something that is more prone to spreading at this point, or is it restaurant settings? Is it churches? Where are you seeing any trends at this point?
So locally, we don't have a lot of data to go on because we haven't had a lot of cases or major outbreaks stemming from those kinds of settings, right? So we have to look everywhere else to see what we can find. What we see everywhere else is that the places where you find these outbreaks that sort of catalyze into sort of a bunch of people who were impacted at once seem to be, right, it's the three WHO C's, the three C's, right? So you've got close contact settings that are congested and confined. So small spaces where lots of people pack in, where there may not be very good ventilation, and in some spaces where people are sort of what we call huffing and puffing, right? So it may not be the gym so much as the fitness class. Like what we're seeing is more you gather people in a room and they're exercising together, as opposed to the independent use of gym equipment. You're just using it by yourself and then leaving, right? So I think over time we're going to be able to get more sophisticated in what we understand about this virus and how it spreads. So let me take you back for 1 second though, right? For every SpinCo outbreak, there were probably 100 gyms that were also running that were doing everything right as well, and there were no outbreaks. So I think that's so important to keep in mind before we start just shutting down settings sort of because there was one outbreak. You have to recognize that one outbreak is not representative of the entire sector or the entire setting, right? So let's go back to the other principle here, which is that the virus does not care why you are socializing, right? So if you're in a really close contact setting, a small space with lots of people, the virus doesn't care what the purpose of that is. It's us. We're collectively making those determinations about this one's okay and this one isn't. But all of those settings are risky in terms of getting the virus.
Thank you for that. Any other comments or questions from committee members? I'm seeing none. I apologize to Deputy Warden Marriott. Hopefully he'll get his questions answered at some point. So if there's nothing further, then Dr. Ranaday, thank you for joining us this morning. Your time is appreciated, and so is all the work that you and your staff are doing.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, moving on. For infrastructure and development services, we've got some items of correspondence here. That's like two items in particular. I'll look for a motion to receive those together. Warden Weber, Councillor Ferguson seconds that. Any discussion on items A or B? Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chair White. I just have a comment to make on the St. Catharines proposal. Over the last 6 months or so, to our knowledge anyway, landfills have become a very controversial issue. And whilst currently, right at this precise moment, I might agree with the proposal that St. Catharines is putting forward, overall, when I stand right back and look at this, I hope everybody is not too focused on who should host and who should be the empowerer. I hope everybody is focused on how to ultimately get rid of all the landfill sites, because we've got to focus on climate change and emissions. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great point. Anything further on these two items of correspondence? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of receiving those? And that is passed. Okay, information reports. We have building services. Hopefully that feedback is not going through to everybody. Is it? Okay. All right, we're good. Information reports. We have 1, 2, 3 of those. I will look for a motion to receive all 3 of those at once, please. Councillor Miller, Councillor Veen seconds that. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? And those are received. Thank you. We have 2 reports requiring a motion, so I'll look to receive or look for those separately. One city county maintenance agreement report. I'll look for a motion on that.
So moved.
Warden Weber, Councillor Veen seconds that. Any discussion? All in favor? That is passed. And we have a local municipal meeting with conservation authorities. Looking for a resolution on that. Councillor Veen, Councillor Napper seconds that. Looks like Deputy Warden Marriott's joining us by phone. Deputy Warden Marriott, welcome back. FYI.
Thank you, Brian. I had a power outage here for some reason, so I'm on my cell phone. So sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. So just chime in. Obviously, I can't see your hand, so just for the record, chime in if you are for or against something. I will assume you are for something if it's routine. But if you are opposed or wish to speak, just find a break and just speak up. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the motion is on the floor. The recommendation is the meeting between local municipalities and 2 conservation authorities. Any discussion or questions on that? Okay, Councillor Ferguson.
I just would like to maybe have them come in anyway. I realize I think we're being put off a little bit. There's going to be some mandate changes, but the way the things are set up now, there's been some issues over building permits. Some is timeliness of building permits. Some is elevations within different municipalities of the height of the foundations. And we need to have a chat with them as a whole. I don't think we need to wait to the very end. I think we should maybe have one earlier. That's my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, certainly look for an amendment if you wish. Councillor Veen.
Yes, thank you, Brian. I truly believe the Conservation Authority should give the county, should pass that along where we don't even have to deal with the Conservation Authority for a building permit. Especially, I can't understand why the county itself can't do that. I think everyone knows that we have competent staff that can tell whether you're building in a flood zone or not. And I really think that it's that should be updated. I don't believe that the Conservation Authority should have that power.
Thank you. I think everybody caught that. Okay.
Why the county itself can't do that. I think everyone knows they can tell whether you're building in a flood, that the Conservation Authority should have that power.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
I propose an amendment that if we do not hear back with the changes to the Conservation Authority by January 31st, we ask for a meeting in February. That gives them a timeline, lets them work with it a little bit, but does set up a date to have a meeting.
Okay. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Bradley? Any discussion on the amendment? Councillor Bean? Councillor Bradley follows. Councillor Bean, you were just trying a second? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Councillor Bradley?
Yeah, to council, to the committee, the issues that were raised by a number of us, including Mayor Loosely, are still the same. And I think what Councillor Ferguson is proposing is the right direction. We still need to have that discussion on the issues that we were concerned about, and these other things will happen, they'll happen irregardless. So I think we should meet and we should get on the record these concerns and then deal with whatever the province does after.
Okay, thank you. Call the question on the amendment. That is to put a timeline of January 31st on, and if we don't hear back, we will ask for the meeting in February. So that's the amendment to the motion. All in favor of the amendment? That is passed. Any further discussion or questions on the main motion? Seeing none, we'll call the question on the main motion. All in favor? And that is passed. Great, thank you. Is there any other business for infrastructure and development services? I believe there's one item for sure.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if there's no other business from the committee, I would just like to take this opportunity to invite Ken Melanson to show his face on the screen. Great, thanks, Ken. I'd like to introduce Ken Melanson. Ken is our new Manager of Planning and Development Services. He has an extensive planning career. He most recently served in the city of St. John, New Brunswick, as well as out west in the city of Calgary. And it's just a good opportunity. He's very, we're lucky to get him, and we're happy to have him here today. So please help me in welcoming him today.
Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome, sir.
Welcome to Lambton County.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Cole. That's always good news. So that's very much appreciated. And is there any other new business? Okay, seeing none, we'll be moving on to public health services. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cole, and to your team. Under public health, we have 2 items to receive, 1 or 2, yeah, 2 items of correspondence to receive and file. Look for a motion to receive those. Councillor Napper, Councillor Miller seconds that. Any discussion on those 2 items? Seeing none, all in favor? That is passed. We have 4 information reports. So I'll look for a motion to accept those in a batch as well. Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Veen seconds that. Any discussion on items A to D? Councillor Bradley. You're on mute, sir.
Item D, I'd raised this issue at the last meeting, and I appreciate the report. There's a couple of questions I had out of that report related to ambulance service. Are there any times in the city of Sarnia where there is not coverage at all? Just no coverage at all? Where there are 0 ambulances available for service within the boundaries? And if you can't answer the question today, I am fine with an update at a further date. A couple other questions is there was 60% reference to the servicing in the city of Sarnia, and I really would ask is are those calls being serviced by the Sarnia crews, or are they coming from outside? That's the second question. The third question is I'd like to see some comparable similar sized areas in cities about how that works out. And the final question is staffing. you went back 10, 15, 20 years, what would be the level of calls versus the staffing levels? And I think with an aging population, not just in Sarnia, but throughout the county, I think we need to know where we're at on those levels of service versus the number of calls and the staffing. So those are the 4 questions that, again, I don't expect to be answered today, but if they could be very briefly answered, I think it would help complete the report.
Hey, Mr. Taylor, anything to add?
Yeah, so thank you for the questions. So through you, Councillor White, we can kind of give you maybe just a high level response. There's 4 areas, so the manager might ask for some clarification. Maybe starting, Steve, with respect to are there Sarnia crews specifically? Because I think that might lend context for you to lead in. So I'll leave it to our manager, Steve Pansino, to respond.
Fine, thank you.
Thanks, Andrew, and through you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the questions. There aren't specific Sarnia crews per se. So the way that we develop the system and the way that we look at the system is, you know, there are Sarnia stations and there are crews that are assigned to start their shift and end their shift at the Sarnia station. However, because the system, and not just in Lambton, in Ontario, the system is designed that the close, and this is historical in nature, the closest ambulance responds to an emergency call. So whether there happens to be a London Middlesex ambulance in Sarnia because they did a transfer from somewhere else, they happen to get the closest call, they are assigned that call. So our system is set up that way. So if you break that down to the local level, the crews that start and end their shift in Sarnia, generally speaking, spend the majority of their shifts in Sarnia. But I'll give you, an example. Let's say there's an emergent transfer to London. Someone's having a stroke and they need to get to University Hospital. If a Sarnia crew does that call, so they're going to be out of the system for a couple of hours, we would then bring, say, a Brigden or a Corona ambulance into the Sarnia area to cover off that station. If those crews get a couple of calls while they're in the city of Sarnia, other ambulances get moved around throughout the system. So it's difficult to say that the crews are assigned specifically to that area. They start and end their shifts there, but we have 10 ambulances in the county. Those 10 ambulances and the crews know that they can end up at any station in any area of the county, really at any given time during their shift. We monitor those shifts and those allocations to try and balance that out so that, let's say, Sarnia being the busier areas, if the crews there are, say, doing 4 or 5, 6 calls, haven't had a chance for a break, we'll actually move those crews to an outlying quieter area. We'll bring the outlying quieter area into Sarnia to do calls there as well. Really, that serves a twofold purpose, and apologize, my answer might be a bit long here, but it can get fairly in the weeds if you get into it. That serves 2 purposes. A, it gives crews a break, and we have specific criteria built into our deployment plans to highlight that, particularly in warm summer months or in the colder areas. And also it gives a chance for some of the quieter stations that aren't seeing the number of patients a chance to see more patients and improve their skills, maintain their skills in that regard. And Andrew, feel free to jump in. Specific to your first question around the, are there times where there are not ambulances in Sarnia? So we have 10 ambulances available 24/7. As calls come in, those level of ambulances decrease. The way the plan is set up is that, when there are down to, say, 2 ambulances available, or sorry, less than 3 ambulances available in the system, we strategically locate those throughout the county to provide, service. But there are times, and we do track this, there are times where there aren't, available units right in the city of Sarnia, just like there are times when there aren't ambulances available, say in Forest or Petrolia per se, but they're in and around that area able to respond. And then I think it was your third question around staffing levels historically versus and call volumes versus what we have now. The call volumes per se and the staffing levels don't really have a one-to-one correlation. What the metric that we use that more accurately reflects that, and when we start to look at increasing staffing levels, it's been alluded to in the last couple of updates surrounding the response time reports, and that's a metric that we call unit utilization. So what that number looks at is a much more accurate reflection of how busy crews are and how what their availability is. So, for example, a unit utilization number of 30 means that 30% of the time that ambulance is not available to respond to a 911 call. They're actually committed on a call, dealing with a patient at a hospital, what have you. They could be on a meal break, they could be on a standby, they could be at another station. They're still available for a call. Those numbers are what we track more closely. And as indicated in those previous reports, and we're more than happy to provide an updated one, shortly if you like. We're well within those norms. We're well within the industry standard. Usually those numbers, when they start creeping up around 45 to 50%, is when we'll start looking at requiring additional resources. So both in Sarnia and as a system, we're not anywhere near those levels.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other questions from other committee members? I've got a couple myself. I'll wait to see hands. Seeing none. Okay. In regards to item C, the foodborne illness outbreak investigation, according to this report, the investigation is ongoing, but it's my understanding now that investigation has concluded. Is that correct?
Yeah, through Council White, that's correct. Correspondence was sent out through Public Health through a news release on the 12th of November, indicating that that outbreak is closed. So at the time of writing this report, we're a little different, but the outbreak is closed and completed.
Okay, thank you for that. And in item D, the opioid trends and response update report, simply wanted to highlight and ask a question under the section community level interventions. The first paragraph there, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, work on the community drug and alcohol strategy was put on hold due to the redeployment of key staff and community partners to the pandemic response. Now, understandably, difficult decisions have to be made like that. And of course, there's much discussion now on the effects of the pandemic, including referenced in this report on addictions and use of drugs and alcohol. What is the status looking like moving forward on that strategy? When can we expect, if you even have an answer for that, when can we expect work to continue on that?
Thank you for the question, Councilor White. Yeah, so the intention is to get back to that work, absolutely. I think what's become very clear throughout Ontario and many jurisdictions is we've seen this drug problem be intensified by COVID to some extent. So there's no intention to shelve this. We have good inputs from community stakeholders in the drug strategy, and I would suspect that we're going to start to bring that group back together and work on the priorities as they were determined and brought to County Council for endorsement as well. So we should be looking to get that work back on track very soon with our stakeholders.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything further? Okay, seeing nothing from the committee, I'll look for the resolution then. I'll call the question on those information reports A to D. All in favor? Opposed? That is passed. Okay, we have one item requiring a motion. That's the Community Paramedicine Administration Vehicle. Look for a motion on that. Warden Weaver, Anyone care to second that, Councillor Ferguson? Do I have any discussion on that? It looks like there is none. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That has passed. Okay, and we're on to other business, if there is any. Look for items from our committee. I see nothing. And how about from staff?
No, we don't have anything else to report. Thank you.
Great. All right, thank you, everybody. We will move on to, thank you, Mr. Taylor, and to your staff. We'll move on to cultural services. We have 3 information reports in front of us here. Curbside pickup, library's third quarter report, and the museum's gallery and archives third quarter report. So I'll look for a motion to receive all of those at once. Councillor Miller, Councillor Bird seconds that. Any discussion? I see none. All in favor? That has passed. Okay, we have 2 reports requiring a motion, so I'll take them separately. The Oil Museum of Canada Renovations report. Look for a motion on that. That's Councillor Veen moving that. Councillor Miller seconds that. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? And that is passed. It's good to see you again, Deputy Warden. And the second item there requiring a motion, use of Schuldt Bequest, Petrolia Library Children's Area Report. I'll look for a motion on that. Warden Weeper moves that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ferguson, thank you. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is passed. Great. Any other business for cultural services? Seeing nothing from the committee. Mr. Meyer, anything from your end?
Nothing for me. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we are moving on. We have no in-camera reports, and that means we are done. I will look for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Bird, Councillor Veen seconds that. All in favor? That is passed. Warden Weber, are you?
I just, if I could, just a comment. Last night, the Federation of Agriculture inducted a member, Bert, anyway, into the Hall of Fame. Brian Royal set up a meeting, and it was Bert Vandenhuel, I believe is his name. And he, quite a history of what he's done for Lambton County and the agriculture section. So just kudos to Federation for making that induction and presenting it in a virtual format. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Congratulations. And is there anything further? See nothing? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good one.